Good afternoon. For our discussion on scholarly survey, my research, again, it takes me into northern Scotland. Here we go. And I picked three different articles that relate to Pict and Pictish society and a discussion on some of the historical context about them this time. The first one I chose was on the nature of Picts. This document, it's by Alex Wolf, discusses many key points regarding the Picts and their historical context. The first one is the continuity of the term Picti, right? So we talked about in a previous video of mine, and that there was no continuous use of the Latin term Picti from its first appearance in the late 3rd century until it was used again in the late 6th century. Picts and their ethnic backgrounds. The Picts in the long 8th century were described as people from various ethnic backgrounds, so they weren't likely one group, but a multiple of tribes that had gathered together. And they were all subject to the kings of Fortru. Once the Fortru Empire crumbled, the groups ceased to be identified as Picts, so they dispersed again. There's a description from Gildas in this of the Picts as transmarines who seized northern Britain from the British, indicating a complex relationship between the different groups in the region. Betty, here we go. Historia Ecclesiastica. In this lists the Picts alongside other groups in Britain, suggesting that they are a distinct group. So there's some disagreement there between whether they were a conglomeration or they were an individualized ethnic group. The document also questions the term proto-Pictish for earlier cultural materials, suggesting that the cultural elements of the Picts themselves may not be as distinct or continuous as we previously thought. So this article itself is proving point and counterpoint to the continuity of Pictish society. The second article I picked was In Quest of Pictish Manuscripts. This talks about the history of Pictland and the Pictish language, right? What the belief of what the language is. Was it Celtic or Gaelic, or where is it originating from? They realized that in some of the old research that they were doing, the Irish medical translations moved from Latin in the beginning of the 16th century, weren't accurate. They were not accurate. So a longer note later found about the Pictish provinces, added by the same individual. The hand is that of the owner of the book itself, Lord William Howard, rather than the historian who they thought it was in the past. So now we have to examine where the information is coming from for an accurate understanding. Exchanging views between authors and further manuscripts containing early Brittonic words were researched. The manuscripts that they studied, Juvenicus, for example, was written in the land of the Picts, but it has Welsh verses in it. So we're seeing Pictish writings, but they're in Welsh. So the reason I picked this one is because it further highlights what we do and what we don't understand about the Picts themselves, what they were writing and how they were speaking, and that there are going to be challenges with this research to determine what's accurate and what's not. Early Scottish monasteries and prehistory is the last article I picked. This is preliminary. It says it's a preliminary dialogue. This fascinated me with reflecting on the diversity of monastic attributes found between the east and west of Britain. The author is proposing that prehistoric ritualistic practices were influential on later monastic forms. The argument is advanced that this was not based solely on inspiration from the landscape, nor conservative, but the intellectual reconciliation of Christian and non-Christian ideas. So here we're seeing that first introduction, that first blush at Christianity, and how it's taking in the pagan ideals, the multi-worship of the people, to make it more amenable to them to convert, to change to the new ideas that the Romans are presenting. Among the general matters that this talks about, they're credited with a prehistoric root or the cult of relics, and then the date of Easter. So the article examines the influence of prehistoric ritual passages on the diverse forms of early medieval monasticism, right, found in Britain. The author in this suggests the early monasteries may have adapted or incorporated existing sacred landscapes, and that's a suggestion, but it's also a suggestion that we know is proven true. And evidence of pre-Christian traditions such as relic veneration, tonsure, and the calculation of the Easter date is explored in this article, looking at the combination and the development of new religions.